Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. So we are going to be diving into some off seasons ahead for the 76ers and Milwaukee Bucks. But I do want to react to the breaking news that Darvin Ham has officially been fired by the Los Angeles Lakers. Got the notification from ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. Ham is fired after 2 seasons, made the playoffs both years, made, of course, the Eastern Conference Finals in his first year, but that was obviously in large part due to the fact that they had a duo of LeBron James and Anthony Davis. The talent, the top-end talent at least, was good enough for the Lakers that they were able to, I wouldn't even say necessarily overcome Darvin Ham. I just don't think that he also either really added anything. Seemed like he really struggled with the rotations this season. In the playoffs when it came to calling timeouts, that was obviously a big conversation as well. But Ham is fired despite going 90-74 over the past 2 seasons, at least during the regular season, I believe those stats are exactly from. Again, doing this a little bit on the fly. But for Ham, I'm sure he'll get another job somewhere in the NBA, but the Lakers did need to make a change at head coach. And as things currently stand, there are a couple names that are being thrown out there in terms of whom that may be. Shams Charania tweeted out that there are 4 names that the Lakers are currently focused on. It is Mike Budenholzer, Kenny Atkinson, JJ Redick. JJ Redick is a very interesting one there. Obviously, co-hosting this podcast with LeBron James in the recent months. So that would be quite some dynamic there. And then Ty Lue, if he were to become available, I don't think that that's going to be the case. He's coaching with the Clippers right now. I feel like it would be a mistake for LA, the Clippers that is, if they were to fire Ty Lue after this season, given some of the other situations surrounding that team. But the Lakers definitely needed to make a change in my eyes, and especially if you're going to try and convince LeBron James to return to the organization. This seemed like the natural move for them. Now, it's not the only move that they're going to have to make. Obviously, they're going to need to upgrade some position players around there. I think that point guard spot in particular is one to look at. I think that finding somebody to replace Rui Hachimura is another move as well. They have some more draft capital that they can sort of use to their advantage in this situation, but obviously a lot of it depends on whether or not LeBron James stays in LA, and we just talked about that the other day. You can check out the video on YouTube if you want more on that, but had to get some thoughts out on the breaking news there. But I also want to talk about the off seasons ahead for the 76ers and Milwaukee Bucks, where both of these teams are, we know that they have the top end talent. Embiid and Giannis are 2 of the best players in the NBA, but there are a lot of moving parts sort of surrounding them. So I want to start with the 76ers, who we talked about in the first segment. The big thing for them is the fact that they now have this open contract slot where Tobias Harris has been taking up a very large chunk of the salary cap for the past handful of years, and now he's going to be gone. ESPN just reported that Harris is probably going to look to find a different home when he hits free agency this summer himself, so I feel like there's probably mutual interest. Harris got a lot of slack from 76ers fans, and can't say I blame them necessarily, but I can understand why he would want to sort of part ways, and I'm curious what type of a contract he's going to fetch, but that is not a worry for the 76ers, who have some options on their hands, and some of the biggest ones include Paul George is the name that has been linked to them the most. I feel like he fits in that 3 slot very well for them. He can be a ball handler. He can be a scorer. Now, obviously, the consistency for him in the playoffs hasn't necessarily been tremendous, but I do feel like it would be putting him with some other real talent, and I don't know, a little bit more youthful. Obviously, Joel Embiid is now 30 years old, so I wouldn't say that he's youthful necessarily, but, at least slightly more available than his co-star in LA in Kawhi Leonard. James Harden is obviously still a big unknown himself. Question is for Paul George, is he going to want to... It was made such a big deal when he is from California. He was returning back home. He was pairing up with the Clippers. He was going to be this new face of the team that's really been looking for their all-time star, and it obviously just hasn't worked out up to this point. How much does he care about winning a ring, winning a championship? Is it enough to move out of LA? I feel like the fit in Philadelphia would be a really good one, and I think that it would be a really good fit for him. I feel like he would have a much better opportunity to win just getting out of the Western Conference, where it is just a stacked conference, of course. And there are some other factors. The fact that they chose to give Kawhi Leonard the max extension. I don't know if it was actually max, but they gave him the contract extension during this offseason after playing good basketball for a couple months. They did not agree on a deal with Paul George at that time. Wonder if he takes any sort of personal sort of feelings towards that, not to sort of start any type of rumors. I'm just sort of spitting out ideas here about how that could be perceived. And for George, I feel like, I don't know, I think his legacy could benefit a lot from having a more legitimate playoff run. Now, his legacy, again, legacy conversations are honestly so stupid more times than not, but it is fun to talk about at the same time, which is why it happens so often. And, I think that he has options on his plate here. He could return to the Clippers. He could go to the 76ers. The Magic are also a team that is reported to be interested in him and helping them sort of develop this young core. Now, it's sort of taking into consideration the conversation about what is their ceiling going to be. Is he going to line up with that type of progression as well? If you're going to Philadelphia, you just dealt with Kawhi Leonard for all of these years and his lack of availability when it comes to the postseason. Are you going to hitch your wagon to Joel Embiid, who has been more available than Kawhi Leonard, but hasn't been super available? The bar is obviously, unfortunately, very low for Kawhi Leonard in terms of availability. So that is... Obviously, upgrading that spot where Tobias Harris is one of the biggest needs for them. And I do think that they need a better backup big, because the on-off stats with Embiid are so drastic and they need an upgrade there. Paul Reed, it's interesting because they had a chance to sort of let him walk this past offseason. The Utah Jazz They offered him a contract. Reed was a restricted free agent. Still, I think one of the funniest moves by the general manager of the Utah Jazz in Danny Ainge. Put in a clause there that if they were to make the conference finals, that he would get an extra incentive. The Jazz were definitely not thinking they themselves would make the conference finals, but it was just sort of an FU to the 76ers to try and let him go. But they decide to pick him up, and unfortunately, and I like Paul Reed a lot. I've been a fan of him, basketball Paul, since he has sort of made his emergence in the NBA, but this was just a really tough series for him, and it was clear that Nick Nurse did not trust him really whatsoever. So it's not, super drastic. He's making $7 million next year. It's going to be $8 million in 2025-26. So they can definitely still add another big to the rotation. Not exactly sure what that is going to be, but I would say those are the two biggest needs for the 76ers. I do like Nick Nurse, as much as he was just crying so much about the referees this series. He's a little bit, I don't know, I don't want to say obnoxious because that's definitely not the right word for him, but he's a personality for sure. But I think he's a great coach, and you know what? That's also sort of the theme of a lot of the people in Philadelphia, of crying about different things that are just not the fact that they were outplayed and that the other team was better. But again, not trying to go down that road right now. I want to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, though, and sort of what their future looks like, because they are in a very interesting situation as well. Now, a lot of people are sort of saying to blow it all up here, that it is just about over for them because of how old they are, and they're very restricted, one of the more expensive teams in the NBA, and they have no control over their draft capital through the 2030 season. They have a pick swap coming up, I believe, in this upcoming season with the Pelicans. So the Pelicans are probably going to hold on to that. I believe, if I have this right, that they are going to have their own first round pick, assuming I have the pick swap details right on that one. And then from there, they don't have their first round pick in 25, another pick swap in 26. They an unprotected they gave away to the Pelicans again in 27, and then they have some with the deal to get Damian Lillard. They gave up control to their own first round pick from 2028 to 2030 to Portland. So the thing is the Bucks could really use sort of the development of some of these younger players, and I've been saying I really like Andre Jackson Jr., and he was getting a little more run at times, but Doc Rivers has never necessarily been someone to trust the younger players on his roster. You could see a definitive change in more Jay Crowder minutes, less Beauchamp and Andre Jackson minutes when they made the switch in whenever it was, December, January, midwinter, when they fired Adrian Griffin and brought him in. There was a pretty abrupt change there, but they're going to have to rely on sort of the development of players that they weren't really expected, because other than that, they're looking in sort of the veteran minimum market because of how much money they have wrapped up into Brook Lopez and Giannis and Chris Middleton and Damian Lillard, and it's going to be interesting to see. Now, we had a Warriors fan in our chat. This was about a month or so ago. He was talking about the possibility of trying to make some type of a move of swapping Brook Lopez to the Warriors in exchange for some of the complementary pieces, maybe some of the wings, maybe a young guard, to try and revamp some youth in the Milwaukee Bucks, and for the Warriors, get a more legitimate big, because that's something that they definitely need in my eyes as well. Could be interesting, like if they could find some way to turn Brook Lopez, and this would also probably require Giannis playing the 5, which I know isn't necessarily his comfortable thing to do, but the Bucks they're kind of handicapped right now, so I'm just sort of tossing out ideas here as to how they could restructure their roster to be championship competitive. If they were to have Giannis run the 5, and then in exchange for Brook Lopez, and again, I'm just throwing out, I don't have deals here, I don't have any sort of mock anything, but it would probably be Andrew Wiggins and a young player would be along those lines. I mean, Brandon Podziemski would probably be the number one ideal option for the Bucks. They need a point of attack defender. I know that Pat Bev was fine during their playoff run, but I do think that they need sort of better options, or at least more options than what things currently have, because they had such a hard time stopping guards all season. And adding Wiggins is tough. I mean, he would more so be in the deal to at least match the contract of Brook Lopez. And then I don't know. I'm just sort of toying it out here. Like, Moses Moody would be fine, but I don't know how much Doc Rivers. Moody is a lot less of a proven as things currently stand than Podziemski, so I don't know if Doc Rivers would necessarily be on board with giving heavy minutes to somebody like that, even though I do feel like he brings a ton of defensive intensity, can shoot the ball, can provide some winning things. It just hasn't necessarily fully worked out with him in Golden State just yet. But definitely let us know in the comment section if you have any types of ideas for fixing Milwaukee, because they have to keep trying. They have Giannis, they have Damian Lillard right now. Now, Lillard could potentially be a flip if they really felt like it. I feel like I would give it another season of trying to develop that two-man game of Giannis and Lillard. I know that they had a full year in comparison to this example I'm about to make with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, where it was very sloppy down the stretch of last season for a lot of it, but now we saw how much they've been able to grow together and build off of one another, and it's been a great fit. I think that Lillard and Giannis still can be one of the best two-man games in the NBA, but we just didn't see it this season. So I would run it back if I'm the Bucks, but again, it is very limited in what other types of moves they can make. Let us know what you feel about both of these teams and their off seasons ahead. But we are going to be taking our final break now, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to be previewing the second round series that we have in place already. So stick with us, and we will be right back.